This is Gone at 21, Katelyn Markham's death investigation. You're listening to Episode 3 of Evidentiary Notes. We're going to be listening to Brad Von Bargen's version of what happened on August 13th, 2011, the last night Katelyn was seen alive. This was taken out of The Investigation, Episode 1. It just didn't fit or relate to anything I was talking about in the first episode. I decided to just leave it as it was and not change anything to the recording. So let's listen to these notes. My next interview was with Brad Von Bargen, the second to last person to see Katelyn alive. You may remember him from our introduction series. At least, he's the second to last person to see Katelyn alive that we know of. He was also the only person in this case that would not allow me to record him. This interview with Brad is taken straight from my handwritten notes as I spoke to him in our first conversation. Brad told me that John contacted him on August 13th, 2011 and asked him about putting a trailer hitch on his Ford Focus. Brad told him to forget it. It's an economy car. John then invited Brad to Katelyn's house to smoke pot and hang out that night. Brad said it was dark when he got there, and he parked his car in the rear parking lot right next to John's. Brad entered through Katelyn's back door. He mentioned the dog, Murphy, was downstairs, and after the initial greeting, he was taken upstairs. Brad said he stayed downstairs, smoked pot with Katelyn and John. He and John were talking. Katelyn was very quiet that night, working on her computer, and occasionally showing Brad some of her artwork and asking, "Do you like this?" or "Check this out." Brad mentioned there was something different with the mood at Katelyn's townhouse that night. Katelyn and John didn't interact or communicate as usual. That's a direct quote from Brad. Brad said he has this thing with overstaying his welcome and left about an hour after he got there. A couple things to note about Brad's visit with Katelyn and John. First of all, Brad observed Katelyn and John to be high when he arrived. John told Brad he and Katelyn just took some shrooms. The dog was taken upstairs after the initial greeting, and towards the end of the visit, Brad said that he thought the shrooms were kicking in because Katelyn and John got giggly. After Brad left Katelyn's house, he went to a friend's house, Ben. Ben and Brad had been friends since they were kids. According to Ben's mom, who I spoke with, Brad arrived about 11:30. Brad said it was about 10:30 or 11. When he arrived at Ben's house, Brad sat in the driveway in his car until Ben got there. Ben's mom told me she was going to go out and tell Brad he could come in, but it was pouring down rain. Brad moved to North Carolina, I've been told, in 2013. I asked for an in-person interview with him. I offered to come to North Carolina so we could talk. A face-to-face interview is a must. Body language can't be read over the phone, and it's easier to form a relationship and trust in a face-to-face meeting rather than being known as a voice over the phone. Brad called me back a couple of days later after thinking about it and declined the interview. He claimed family issues and he didn't have any information that could help me with the investigation. We will hear Brad's name again later on in this podcast. So there you have the pertinent information on Brad Von Bargen's first interview. I have just a couple more things I want to go over. With the information I know about shrooms, you don't take them and then go to bed an hour or so later. You're up quite a while. And remember, John Carter said that Katelyn was going to bed. And it would have been about an hour and a half between the time Katelyn took the shrooms and her going to bed. That is according to the correct timeline, which we'll discuss later on in the podcast. Number 2, Brad told me he was Katelyn's friend, so it was unusual that John contacted him directly. Number 3, remember the dog was in the bedroom when John arrived and discovered Katelyn was missing. Just remember the dog. As we go through this podcast, Brad said he was taken upstairs. That concludes this episode of Evidentiary Notes. The Investigation, Episode 2, will be coming out February 17th. If you like this podcast, remember to subscribe and like, rate, and review. If you'd like to help support this podcast, please go to Gone at 21, the Facebook page. There, you will see a GoFundMe link pinned to the top of the page. Just click on the link, and any amount you're willing to donate will be greatly appreciated. Until next time, I'm Jay Ryan. Take care.